So I have a question. How many people here speak more than one language fluently? Okay, maybe a better question. How many people have tried to learn a second language? Some of you may have taken a class in high school like I did, or maybe you've used an app like Duolingo or Rosetta Stone. But anyone that's tried to learn a second language knows something important. There's a difference between studying a language and learning a language. So you can memorize vocabulary words, you can study grammar rules, you can pass a test. But the people who become fluent are usually the people that immerse themselves in the language. They hear it, they speak it, they surround themselves with it. They begin to think differently because they are constantly exposed to it. And for years, educators have recognized that one of the most effective ways to learn a new language is to immerse yourself in it. And this is especially true for children whose minds are still developing. But here's something interesting. Immersion doesn't only apply to languages. You can immerse yourself in a culture. If you move to another country, you don't learn the culture by reading one book on the airplane on the ride over. You learn by living among the people, experiencing the customs, becoming part of that community. You can also immerse yourself in a skill. Most of you know that I have a day job as owner of a window treatment business. I added it up a while back, and over the 25 years that I've been in that industry, I have completed over 15,000 projects. Everything from hanging blinds to hanging curtains. When you do something that many times, it becomes more than just something that you know how to do. It becomes almost second nature. Likewise, you can immerse yourself in a topic or an activity. Someone who's passionate about a subject, they don't just casually interact with it. I mean, there are people who can tell you the average on-base percentage and batting average of every member of the 2016 World Series champion Chicago Cubs. There are people that can tell you the difference between Star Trek, Stargate, and Battlestar Galactica, and they will fight you if you get it wrong. So what does that have to do with our gathering here today? Well, today we are going to be answering the question, what is a disciple? And just like you can immerse yourself in a language or a skill or an activity, you can, in fact, immerse yourself in the life of a person. When Jesus called his disciples, he wasn't simply inviting them to attend a class or memorize a set of beliefs. He was inviting them into a life of immersion. Because discipleship was never meant to be a classroom experience. It was always meant to be a life experience. See, those men were not trained as rabbis. They were not religious scholars that were sitting at the feet of the elite teachers of their day. They were fishermen, tax collectors, ordinary people. But for years, they walked with Jesus. They listened to him teach. They watched how he treated people. They saw how he responded to suffering. They witnessed how he prayed, how he loved, and how he lived. See, a disciple is not just someone who believes in Jesus. A disciple is someone that follows him, is formed by him, and joins him. Or simply put, a disciple is someone who immerses themselves in the life of Jesus. And that's the invitation that Jesus gives us today. But before we talk about what disciples do, we have to start with a more fundamental question. Where does discipleship begin? It begins with an invitation. When Jesus first called his disciples, he didn't start by handing them a list of expectations. He didn't begin by explaining every little detail they would need to know. He simply looked at ordinary people and said, "Follow me." So today we're going to dig a little deeper into what it means to follow Jesus. And we begin in the book of Mark, starting with chapter 1, verses 16 through 20. And as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." They immediately left their nets and followed him. When he had gone a little farther from there, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who also were in the boat mending their nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and went after him. So what does Jesus actually mean when he says, "Follow me"? Because many people in churches all across America have heard that expression for years, but no one has ever stopped to ask what it means. So think about this. If I told you that I follow a well-known preacher or evangelist or whatever, it might mean that I subscribe to his social media posts or follow his YouTube channel. It could mean that I read one of his books or listen to his podcast. Could just mean that I agree with some of the things he says. But when Jesus says, "Follow me," he was not asking for a digital relationship. He was asking for a directional relationship. He wasn't saying, "Add me to your friends list." He was saying, "Center your life around me." I mean, we look at what happens in verse 18 when Jesus spoke to Peter and Andrew. They immediately left their nets and followed him. They didn't say, "Well, we like what you have to say, and, we'll fit you into our schedule when we can, but, we got a lot of work to do with these boats." No. They left immediately. They followed. They went after Jesus. The first disciples did not simply add Jesus to their existing lives. They rearranged their lives around him. Because following Jesus means leaving something behind. Now, when we hear that, we need to understand what Jesus is and is not saying. He isn't teaching that every follower needs to quit their job, leave their family, or give away everything they own. Peter's fishing business wasn't sinful. James and John's family wasn't the problem. The issue wasn't what they were leaving behind. The issue was who was calling them. When Jesus said, "Follow me," they had to answer one simple question: who will have first place in my life? Would they continue building their lives around what they'd already known, or would they build their lives around Jesus? That's the heart of discipleship. Following Jesus doesn't mean adding him to an already busy life. It means making him the center of your life. For Peter and Andrew, it meant leaving their nets. For James and John, it meant leaving their boat and even their father standing on the shore. The details were different, but the decision was the same. For these early disciples, they didn't make Jesus one of several priorities. They made him the priority that would shape all the other priorities. But Jesus never calls people to simply leave something. He always calls them to something greater. He called them to know him, to walk with him, to watch him, to learn from him. Because following Jesus means learning from Jesus. Today's world, if you want to learn with someone, you can probably seek them out. You can go to a college, you can take a class, you can subscribe to a podcast. Even in the corporate world, many companies offer mentoring programs. Sometimes you can ask someone to mentor you. But in many cases, it's often the mentor who sees potential in someone and chooses to invest in them. That's remarkably similar to what Jesus did. Peter didn't approach Jesus and say, "Can I be your disciple?" James and John didn't go online and fill out an application form. Andrew didn't have to pass an entrance exam. Jesus came looking for them. He saw something in ordinary fishermen that maybe they didn't see themselves. And he invited them to spend their lives learning from him. Church, that's still how discipleship begins today. Before we even think about following Jesus, he's already pursuing us. His grace always comes before our response. So if we turn over a couple chapters in Mark chapter 3, verse 14, it says, "Then he appointed 12 that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach." Notice what comes first. Jesus didn't say that they might plant a church. He didn't say that they might perform miracles. He didn't even say that they might change the world. He said that they might be with him. Before Jesus calls them to ministry, he calls them to relationship. Before he calls them to serve, he called them to stay close. And before he called them to represent him, he called them to know him. Sometimes I think we reverse that order. We become so focused on doing things for Jesus that we might neglect spending time with Jesus. That's where I was at this morning with the sound system. It's got to be right. It's got to be right. There's no sound. There's no sound. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Doesn't matter. Discipleship always begins with his presence before it moves to our performance. And think about how the disciples actually learned. Yes, they listened to Jesus teach. They were there for the Sermon on the Mount. They heard all the parables. But they learned just as much by watching him live. They watched him stop for people that everyone else ignored. They watched him touch the lepers and welcome children into his presence. They watched him respond with compassion when others responded with condemnation. They watched him withdraw to lonely places to pray. They watched him trust his Father completely. They watched him forgive, they watched him love, and they watched him serve. This is why I said earlier that discipleship was never meant to be a classroom experience. It was always meant to be a life experience. Jesus wasn't simply transferring information. He was modeling transformation. And I've talked about this before. It's the difference between academic knowledge and applied knowledge. The difference between head knowledge and heart knowledge. See, it's possible to know who Jesus is and what he taught without becoming like Jesus. It's possible to quote scripture and still struggle to love your neighbor. It's possible to know Bible facts and still fail to trust God when life becomes difficult. Yes, knowledge matters, truth matters, doctrine matters, but biblical discipleship is about more than information. It's about transformation. And that's exactly what Jesus promised back in Mark chapter 1. Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men. Notice those words, I will make you become. Jesus never expected his disciples to transform themselves. That was his job. Their responsibility was to stay close enough to him to be changed by him. The more they walked with Jesus, the more they became like Jesus. And that's still how discipleship works today. The goal isn't simply that we know more about Jesus next year than we do this year. The goal is to become more like Jesus next year than we are today. If someone spent the next 3 years following you, what would they learn about Jesus by watching your life? Now, I know what you're thinking. But James, I don't have anyone following me like that. Are you sure? Do you have children, brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles, co-workers? In 3 years or 30 years, whatever it is, you will impact the lives of more people than you realize, one way or the other. The question is, how will they be impacted? Will they see someone that lives out their faith? Or will they see someone that's a Christian in name only? See, that's why discipleship matters so much. Jesus wasn't interested in producing people who simply knew more about God. He wasn't looking for people that could win Bible trivia competitions. He wasn't looking for people that could impress others by how much scripture they knew. His desire was to transform ordinary people into men and women who looked more and more like him. But even that wasn't the end goal. Remember the words Jesus spoke in Mark chapter 1. He didn't simply say, "Follow me." He said, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." From the very beginning, Jesus had a purpose in mind. He called them to follow him. He promised to shape them, and then he would send them. Because following Jesus means joining Jesus on mission. See, discipleship was never meant to stop with us. Jesus transforms us so that he can work through us. When Jesus called Peter and Andrew away from their nets, he wasn't asking them to give up fishing because fishing was not important. He was inviting them into something greater. They had spent their lives catching fish, but now he was calling them to reach people. The same hands that pulled nets from the Sea of Galilee would one day help build the church. The same voices that had called across the water to one another would one day proclaim the gospel to thousands. Jesus didn't waste their experiences. He used them. He took ordinary people with ordinary skills and gave them an extraordinary purpose. And he still does that today. Jesus doesn't call us simply so that we can enjoy a personal relationship with him. He calls us so that we can come to know him and so that others can come to know him through us. And God rarely calls us away from our past without also calling us into something greater. The things that he's taught you, the experiences that you've lived through, the gifts he's given you, even the failures that he's brought you through. None of those things are wasted when they're surrendered to him. Think about the disciples. If you were choosing 12 people to change the world, would you have chosen fishermen, a tax collector, men with no formal religious training? Probably not. Yet those are exactly the people that Jesus chose. Because discipleship has never been about our ability. It's always been about our availability. Jesus isn't looking for perfect people. He's looking for people who are willing to follow him, to learn from him, and to join him. And that's still the invitation today. Not just to pastors, not just to missionaries, not just to people in full-time ministry, but to every follower of Jesus. Some of us will join his mission in our homes, some in our workplaces, some in our schools, neighborhoods. Some of us will join his mission across the street or around the world. The mission may look different, but the calling is the same. He's still saying, follow me. So consider this. We started this morning by talking about immersion. How the things we immerse ourselves in eventually shape the way we think, the way we live, and ultimately the people we become. That's true for languages, it's true for skills, culture, every area of life. And it's certainly true when it comes to following Jesus. So what are you immersing yourself in? Because whatever you immerse yourself in will shape you. If we immerse ourselves in the voices of the world will shape us. If we immerse ourselves in comfort will shape us. If we immerse ourselves in fear will shape us. But if we immerse ourselves in Jesus, if we spend time with him, if we learn from him, if we follow him, then over time, Jesus will shape us into the people he created us to be. And that's what a disciple is. Not simply someone that believes a set of truths. It's not someone that attends church every Sunday. A disciple is someone who follows Jesus, is formed by Jesus, and joins Jesus in his mission. My prayer is that each of us will take another step toward becoming true disciples of Jesus Christ. Because that's his invitation. Not simply believe in me, but follow me.